What if I told you that there's a secret lying at the edge of the universe, one that could change the fate of an entire species? A secret so powerful, so unexpected, that it challenges everything we think we know about survival, hope, and the very essence of life itself. This isn't a distant dream, but a reality, hidden away, waiting to be uncovered. Let me explain how a seemingly ordinary human female, one who might appear fragile to the untrained eye, became the key to the survival of an entire alien race. It all starts with a discovery, one that could have easily slipped through the cracks of history, buried among the ruins of forgotten star systems. Picture this, the Cygnus Rift, a place so distant, so dangerous, that even the bravest of explorers dare not venture there. Yet when a quiet, unsuspecting ship crewed by a few determined souls makes its way to this very edge of the universe, something unimaginable is found. A derelict vessel, ancient and abandoned. Yet inside this forsaken hulk, something extraordinary waits, not a treasure, not a weapon, but something far more profound. A human female preserved in stasis, untouched by the ravages of time. This human, this fragile yet indomitable creature, holds the power to change the fate of not just one, but multiple species. At first glance, she's nothing more than an artifact. But as the story of Professor Thorn and his discovery unfolds, you'll come to realize that humanity, those resilient, adaptable, and ever-determined beings, may just hold the key to a galactic secret that no one ever saw coming. In this episode, we journey with Professor Thorn, a brilliant yet unassuming scientist, as he unravels the unimaginable truth hidden within the human genome. His discovery will shake the very foundation of what we believe about human perseverance, adaptability, and determination. What he uncovers in this ancient stasis chamber will not only leave you questioning the limits of human potential, but it will also offer a glimpse into the extraordinary capabilities that lie within us all. Hold on tight. This is a story not just about a single human, but about the sheer audacity of humanity itself, ready to face down the cosmos with nothing but determination and willpower. It was supposed to be just another routine exploration, the kind of mission that seemed mundane on paper, tucked away in the endless calendar of a scientist's life. Professor Thorn had seen his share of derelict ships, lifeless remnants of civilizations long forgotten. Nothing ever stood out. They were all the same, old husks, silent monuments to a time that was gone. But this was different. As and his assistant Niall boarded the abandoned vessel, the air was thick with the weight of history. The ship was centuries old, ancient by any standard, but its condition was nearly pristine, untouched by the ravages of time or the void. The silence was deafening, like the ship itself was holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to disturb its eternal stillness. "Something feels off," Niall muttered under his breath, scanning the empty hallways with unease. Didn't respond. He felt it too. There was something strange about this ship, something that gnawed at the back of his mind, but there was no turning back now. He needed answers, and they were too close. They navigated the winding corridors, their footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. The hum of their equipment and the soft whir of their boots against the cold metal floor was the only sound in a ship that had clearly seen better days. Yet despite the decay, there was a persistent energy in the air, something alive, buried beneath the cold metal skin of this forgotten relic. They arrived at the central chamber. It was far larger than anything had expected, a stark contrast to the small, claustrophobic passageways that had led them here. And there it was, suspended in the middle of the room, bathed in a soft blue light. A stasis pod, encased in transparent material, A figure lay motionless within. A human female. Vra's breath caught in his chest. He had read about humans, of course. The legends, the stories passed down about their resilience, their stubbornness, their potential. But seeing one so perfectly preserved, was beyond anything he could have imagined. "What is this?" Niall's voice trembled, his hands hovering over his scanner. "A human? In stasis? Out here?" Vra moved forward slowly, his mind racing. He studied the pod with a scientific curiosity that barely masked the unease beginning to settle in his gut. The human's face was serene, untouched by time, her features delicate, frozen in a moment. That felt far too intimate for a being he had never met. "How is this possible?" Niall whispered. His voice was awed, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile moment. Vra didn't answer right away. His mind was elsewhere, drawn to the question that had been building with every passing second. The timing, the isolation, this discovery was too perfect to be a coincidence. The ship's condition, the way it had been preserved, it didn't make sense. What was this human doing here, alone, in the deep recesses of space? And why hadn't anyone else found her before? His fingers grazed the surface of the stasis pod, feeling the strange warmth that emanated from it. It was an unfamiliar sensation, one he couldn't quite place, but it made him feel as if he had just stumbled upon something that had been waiting for him, for them. "She's alive," Vra said, more to himself than to Niall, his voice thick with the weight of the discovery. Niall's eyes widened in disbelief. "How? This ship's been lost for centuries." Vra nodded slowly. He felt it too. The pulse of something powerful and inexplicable emanating from the stasis pod. It wasn't just the human, no, it was something deeper, something tied to this ship, to the energy that had preserved it all these years. It was a mystery that defied explanation, yet the answers were tantalizingly close, just within reach. The decision hit him like a sudden jolt, shaking him from his thoughts. This was no ordinary find. It wasn't just the mystery of the ship or the technology. It was her, the human female, her DNA. For a brief moment, Vra thought about the implications. What did it mean for the Quillan species to find such a relic? A race on the verge of extinction, a species that had long since lost its ability to adapt to the changing environment of their planet. The idea was both exhilarating and terrifying. Could this human, whose kind had once thrived on adaptability, hold the secret to their survival? Could her genetic makeup provide the answer to their decline? The thought was almost absurd. Humans? The solution to the decay of an entire species? But in that moment, as Vra stood over the stasis pod, the weight of history pressing on his chest, he couldn't help but feel a pull, a desperate need to know more. To unlock the potential that was frozen within this one, seemingly insignificant individual. "Vra, what are you thinking?" Niall's voice brought him back to the present. Vra looked at his assistant, meeting his gaze with determination. "We need to revive her. We have to study her, understand what makes her so different." Niall's eyes darted nervously. "But is that even ethical? What if she doesn't want this?" "We don't know who she is or what she's been through." Vra didn't answer immediately. His mind raced with the possibilities. The stakes were too high to hesitate. The Quillans were dying. Their species was on the brink of extinction. Could he really afford to let something so potentially life-saving slip away? The answer, though difficult to admit, was clear. We need her. It's the only chance we have left. But even as he said the words, doubt crept in. What if they were wrong? What if waking her, reviving her, unleashed consequences they couldn't even imagine? Still, the decision was made. With the approval of the Quillan Directorate, an approval he knew was begrudging at best, Vra and his team set about extracting the girl's DNA. They had no idea what they were truly unlocking, but one thing was certain. The door was opening. and they were about to step through. And so the adventure began. Little did they know that they were standing on the edge of a precipice, about to make a discovery that would alter the course of history. What came next, Vra couldn't yet fathom. But one thing was for sure. They had just opened a door they might not be able to close. The moment Eno's stasis pod powered down, there was a subtle, almost imperceptible hum that filled the room. The kind of hum that didn't just come from the machinery. It was as if the entire ship, the very fabric of the universe around them, was exhaling in relief. The quiet, dead stillness that had hung in the air for so long now seemed to breathe with new life. For a brief second, everything seemed frozen. Vra stood there, his heart pounding, waiting. Niall, who had been at the controls, stared at the readings in disbelief. The human female, Eno, was alive. There were no words, only the sound of the pod opening, the soft hiss of air escaping, as though the world was still too afraid to disturb this delicate moment. And then it happened. Eno's eyes fluttered open. Her gaze was not the gaze of someone just waking from sleep. It wasn't slow, groggy, or confused. No. Eno's eyes snapped open, bright, aware, and piercing, as if she had been awake all along, just waiting for the right moment to step into this new world. Vra's breath caught in his throat. He had seen humans before in old data logs, books, and ancient records, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Where am I?" Eno asked, her voice clear and steady, without hesitation. Her tone, a stark contrast to the heavy silence of the room. Vra and Niall exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to respond to a being who had just woken from centuries of stasis and already seemed to have full awareness of her surroundings. "You're aboard a Quillan research vessel," Vra finally managed to say, trying to mask his surprise. "You've been in stasis for a long time." Eno didn't seem to process the shock in his voice. Instead, her focus shifted to the shimmering light of the room, to the strange foreign technology surrounding her. It was as though she had seen this before. She slowly raised a hand, as if testing the air, her fingers hovering just above the surface of the stasis pod, and then it happened. A crackling energy burst from her fingertips, a sudden flash of raw power that sent a ripple through the air. The metal walls of the chamber groaned in response, vibrating violently as if reacting to the surge. The faint sound of electricity sparked, and the room flickered briefly with light. Vra and Niall stumbled, backward, eyes wide. The energy wasn't just strong, it was unlike anything they had ever seen. They had expected a recovery, a gradual awakening. They had expected someone, something vulnerable. But this was power. Did I do that?" Eno asked, her voice calm despite the chaos that had just unfolded in the room. "Eno, I don't know what you just did," Vra muttered, his mind racing. What had just happened? What was she capable of? For the next several days, Vra watched as Eno's cognitive abilities accelerated beyond comprehension. She absorbed information with the precision of a supercomputer, learning languages with frightening speed. Within hours, she was speaking basic Quillan perfectly. Within days, she had already mastered complex scientific theories that would have taken years for even the brightest minds of the Quillan species to grasp. Vra tried to understand it, to measure it, but the numbers didn't make sense. The human mind, with its limitations, was not supposed to be capable of this kind of adaptation. Yet here she was, shattering all expectations. There was something extraordinary about her, something far beyond what any of them could have imagined. But it wasn't just her mind. As Eno's powers grew, so did her potential. It became evident that her ability to manipulate energy was not just impressive, it was otherworldly. She could bend the energy fields around her with ease, manipulating the electromagnetic forces in ways that made the laws of physics bend under her will. Her body, too, was adapting, growing stronger and faster. She wasn't just a human, she was something more, something beyond any species they had ever encountered. Vra's fascination shifted into something darker, something far more complicated. As her powers grew, so did his concern. He was no longer looking at a scientific marvel. He was looking at a weapon that could change everything for the Quilan species, if they could control it, and that was the problem. The Quilan Directorate, once they became aware of Eno's existence, began making their intentions clear. They wanted her, not for study, not for understanding. They wanted her DNA. They wanted to harness her power for their own purposes, to use her as a weapon to tip the balance of power in their favor. The Directorate had long been a bureaucratic nightmare, greedy and driven by politics. But this was beyond what they had ever imagined. Eno's powers, if used properly, could ensure the Quilan race's dominance over any species in the galaxy. Vira had no illusions about the Directorate's motives. He knew what they were capable of: the political scheming, the ruthless pursuit of power. It was the same game every time, but this time it was different. Eno was different. The question that gnawed at Vra every hour of every day was no longer just about ethics, it was about survival. Would he allow Eno to be used as a tool in a war she didn't understand? Would he allow the Directorate to take advantage of her, to manipulate her abilities for their own gain, knowing full well the consequences for her and the species she had never asked to save? He wrestled with the choices before him. To protect Eno would mean defying the very government that could save the Quilan people. It would mean becoming an outlaw, fighting against the very system he had once sworn to serve. To let the Directorate use her would mean giving away her autonomy, her soul, in exchange for a short-term victory that might not even guarantee their survival. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. "I can't let them use you," Vra finally said to her, the words heavy with regret and determination. Eno met his gaze, the silence between them thick with unspoken understanding. She had been a pawn before, now she was his ally, and yet the danger was far from over. The Directorate would not stop, not until they had her. The days stretched on, each one bringing new threats, new dangers. Vra knew they couldn't run forever. The clock was ticking. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a race against time. Would Vra and Eno make it out alive? Would they manage to escape the Directorate's iron grip? And what would happen when Eno's power reached its peak? When she became more than just the key to survival, but the one thing that could either save or destroy them all? The answers were still out there, waiting, hidden beneath the surface. And Vra had no idea what was coming next. But one thing was certain: the stakes had never been higher. The escape plan had been set into motion. Every second, every move calculated. Vara could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, the magnitude of what they were doing. Protecting Eno from the Directorate was no small feat, and now, with their backs against the wall, the tension reached its peak. There was no turning back now. It wasn't just about saving one life. It was about changing the course of an entire species, one that was on the brink of extinction. The stakes had never been higher. The ship groaned as Vra and Eno moved through its winding corridors, each step bringing them closer to freedom. But the Directorate's forces were relentless. They were everywhere. Every shadow seemed to hide another set of eyes, watching, waiting. There was no place left to hide, no safe harbor in sight. Vra could feel the familiar pulse of dread coiling in his stomach, but there was something else now, too, something unexpected. It wasn't just fear. It was adrenaline, determination. He couldn't afford to fail. Not now, not when the stakes were this high. Vra, Eno said, her voice soft, but laced with an intensity that matched his own. She was walking beside him, her gaze flickering nervously as they moved deeper into the heart of the ship. "They'll catch us, won't they?" Vra stopped, looking at her. For the first time, he saw something other than power in her eyes. He saw vulnerability. It was a fleeting moment, one that quickly vanished as she looked away, but it cut through him like a blade. "We'll make it," he said, his voice low but resolute. "We're not giving up." The words were meant to reassure her, but they felt hollow even as he said them. The Directorate's forces were closing in, and he knew it. But he refused to let fear take hold, not while Eno was counting on him. With every corridor they passed, with every turn, they were getting closer. The escape pod was only a few minutes away, hidden deep within the ship's lowest levels. But just as the door to their freedom seemed within reach, the unthinkable happened. A new, unmistakable sound echoed through the ship, a sound Vray had come to dread. The unmistakable hum of the Directorate's transport ships. They had arrived. "What's going on?" Eno asked, her eyes scanning the dark hallways. "They're already here?" Vra didn't answer. He didn't have to. He could feel the weight of their presence pressing in on him. The Directorate had arrived far quicker than he expected. Somehow they had known exactly where they were going. He cursed under his breath, pushing Eno forward. They couldn't stop. Now, they couldn't afford to. Every second mattered. His heart raced, his mind spinning, trying to figure out how they'd been found. And then it hit him. A cold chill ran through him. The Directorate wasn't just fast, they had an insider. Someone within their own ranks had betrayed them. A split second later, the reality of the betrayal hit him like a punch to the gut. Escape plan had been compromised from the start. They'd known. They'd always known. The Directorate had been waiting for them to make their move. They had anticipated every action, every choice, every risk. And now they were ready to strike. A door slammed shut behind them. They were trapped. "No!" Vra gasped, his voice hoarse. "We can't be—" But the words died in his throat as the lights above them flickered. The shadows in the hallway shifted. Soldiers emerged from every corner, blocking the exit. "Professor Thorne!" A cold voice called from behind him. It was familiar, too familiar. It was Director Grayson, the same person who had given Vra the order to extract Eno's DNA. The same person who had told him to keep her alive, to study her, to control her. But now, that same voice was filled with something darker, something far more threatening. "Did you honestly think you could run forever?" Grayson's words dripped with contempt as he stepped forward, flanked by armed soldiers. "You've betrayed your species, Thorne, and now you'll pay the price." Vra's mind raced. He had known the Directorate would stop at nothing to get their hands on Eno, but this was beyond anything he had expected. There was no escape, no way out. They were surrounded, outnumbered, outgunned. But then something extraordinary happened. Eno stepped forward, her gaze unwavering as she locked eyes with Grayson. Her body trembled slightly, the strain of what she had just witnessed beginning to take its toll. But in that moment, the power that had been building inside her surged once again. "Step back," Eno said, her voice steady and strong, the words carrying a weight that made the very air in the room hum. "You won't take me." Grayson's lips curled into a sneer. "You think you can stop us? You're nothing more than a weapon, and now you'll do as you're told." But as the Directorate's soldiers advanced, Eno raised her hands, her fingers glowing with a soft, dangerous light. The air around them seemed to ripple, like the very atmosphere was bending under her will. A force field shot out from her hands, slamming into the soldiers and sending them flying backward with a violent crash. Vra's breath caught in his throat as the room filled with a brilliant flash of energy. Eno's power was beyond anything he could have imagined. It was raw, untamed, and terrifying in its magnitude, but with every burst of energy, Eno's strength waned. He could see it in her eyes, the toll it was taking on her. the sacrifice she was making. "Eno, stop!" Vry shouted, but she didn't listen. Instead, she turned to him, her face pale but determined. "I won't let them take me, not without a fight. I'm not just some tool for them to use." The words hit Vra like a slap to the face, but it wasn't just her defiance that shook him. It was her selflessness, her willingness to put everything on the line, to risk her life for the very people who had exploited her. And then, in the most heart-wrenching moment, Eno reached out to him. "Go, Vra, save yourself, you have to." He couldn't believe what he was hearing. She was asking him to leave her behind, to abandon the one person who had trusted him with her life. "No," Vra whispered, shaking his head. "I'm not leaving you." But Eno's power surged one last time, a brilliant flash that engulfed the room. The soldiers were thrown backward, but Vra had to shield his eyes from the blinding light. When the light faded, Eno was standing there, barely conscious, but alive. Her voice was soft, barely audible as she whispered, "Go now." There was a pause between them, and for a fleeting moment it felt like time itself had slowed. They both knew what was at stake. They both knew that the Directorate's reach was long, that their pursuit was inevitable. But there was something else that lingered between them now, a bond forged in fire, in desperation, in shared sacrifice. Vara's mind turned back to the data they had collected during their flight, the scans of the moon they had passed, the one that had seemed so ordinary before. But now, as he replayed the information in his mind, a thought began to form, a possibility. He stood up quickly, his heart racing as the pieces clicked into place. "Vra?" Eno asked, her voice tentative as she noticed his sudden urgency. "What's wrong?" "I think I know how to help you," he said, his voice a mix of excitement and fear. "The moon, it's not just a moon. It has unique quantum properties. If we can harness that energy, it might be able to stabilize you, help you regain control." Eno frowned, clearly exhausted but still fighting to keep her focus. "And what do you mean by harnessing it? Do you even know what you're asking?" Vra's face hardened with determination. "I know the risks, Eno, but it's our best chance. We're running out of time. If we don't act now, I don't know how much longer your body will hold up." She stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing the decision that could change. Everything, the quiet calm of the moment had dissipated, and the weight of the unknown future settled over them both. "I trust you, Vra," she said quietly, her voice filled with a weary but unshakable trust. "But if this goes wrong, we won't let it go wrong," Vra said, cutting her off. "We can't afford that." And with that, the calm before the storm shattered. The choice had been made. There was no turning back now. They would take the risk, whatever it took to save her, to give her a chance at life beyond the power that had been forced upon her. But as Vra set the course for the moon, he knew that the storm wasn't just coming. It was already here. And no matter how hard they fought, they would never be free of it. The quiet hum of the ship was all that filled the air as Vra and Eno entered the moon's orbit. The vast emptiness of space stretched out before them, a cold, indifferent expanse that seemed to mock their smallness. Yet, here they were, on the brink of something monumental. Their journey had led them here, not to a place of safety, but to a place of uncertainty, a place where the unknown held the key to their survival. The moon loomed ahead, its surface seemingly barren, but Vra knew better. The scans they had collected during their flight had shown something extraordinary beneath. Its surface, a hidden quantum energy unlike anything they had ever encountered. And it was this energy, this strange power, that Eno's body seemed to resonate with, the very thing that might save her life. "This is it," Vra said, his voice low but steady, his eyes locked on the moon ahead. "We're almost there." Eno, her face pale and drawn, nodded without speaking. Her body had been pushed to its limits. Every second spent in the throes of her power had drained her further. She wasn't sure how much longer she could hold on, but she was determined. There was no other choice, not anymore. As they made their final approach, Vra's thoughts were a whirlwind. The Directorate was still out there, relentless, closing in on them with every passing moment. The escape had only been temporary. The real battle was still ahead, but for now there was only the moon. And Eno. "Vra," Eno said, her voice a mere whisper as she turned to him. "You're sure this will work?" Vra met her gaze, his heart heavy with a truth he couldn't bring himself to fully face. "I don't know, Eno, but it's the only shot we have." She gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was the first time he had seen her smile in what felt like forever, and for a moment it made everything else seem less dire, less impossible. "We're doing it together," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Whatever happens, we're in this together." The ship touched down on the moon's surface with a soft thud, and Vra immediately began to prepare for the final phase of their plan. The moon was more than just a lifeless rock. Beneath its crust lay an energy source, an ancient power, waiting to be awakened. And somehow, Eno had become the conduit for that power. As Vra worked, setting up the necessary equipment to stabilize the moon's energy and direct it to Eno's body, he could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on him. They were on the precipice of something larger than either of them had ever anticipated. But what if it wasn't enough? What if this wasn't enough to save her? Eno, her face contorted in pain, tried to steady herself against the trembling surface of the ship. The strain on her body was too much to bear. She reached out toward Vra, her hand shaking but determined. "I can feel it," she whispered. "The energy. It's alive. It's calling to me." Vra froze for a moment, his hands hovering over the controls. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "Eno, don't!" But she cut him off, her voice firm. "I have to. This is the only way. I have to merge with it, Vra. I don't have a choice." In that moment, everything seemed to still. The tension in the air, the sense of impending doom, it all seemed to crystallize into a single, inevitable truth. There was no other choice. No escape, no second chance. With one final desperate breath, Eno stretched out her hands, reaching for the moon's energy. The light around her began to shimmer and twist, like the very fabric of reality bending under the weight of her power. Vra could only watch in stunned silence as the energy connected with her, swirling around her like a storm. And then it happened. A burst of light exploded from Eno, brighter than any star, and the entire ship was engulfed in a blinding glow. Vra shielded his eyes, but he could feel the heat, the raw power of the energy as it surged through her. The ship groaned, its hull creaking under the force of the quantum power being unleashed. The air itself seemed to vibrate with a newfound intensity, as if the very universe was reacting to what Eno had become. When the light finally faded, Eno was no longer the fragile human she had once been. She was something else, something more. She stood before Vra, her body glowing with the energy of the moon itself, her eyes filled with an intensity that he couldn't comprehend. "I did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but with a sense of triumph that sent chills down Vra's spine. "I'm whole." But the victory, though undeniable, was bittersweet. As Eno took a slow, steady breath, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The Directorate had been thwarted, yes. But that didn't mean their journey was over. It was far from over. Eno's survival, her ability to merge with the moon's energy, had come at a cost. She wasn't the same person she had been before. Her connection to the energy was undeniable, but it was also dangerous, unpredictable. And as the energy crackled around her, Vera knew that they had only just begun to scratch the surface of what this transformation meant. "Vra," Eno said, Her voice strained as she slowly collapsed to her knees. I don't know how much longer I can hold this, how long I can keep it together. Vra rushed to her side, his hands trembling as he helped support her. You're not alone, he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. We'll figure this out, together. But even as he spoke, Vra could feel the weight of the uncertainty pressing down on them both. The Directorate was gone for now, but the universe was vast, and there were forces out there far more powerful than anything they had encountered. Forces that were watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the ship hummed softly, signaling their next move, Vra stood beside Eno, his heart heavy with the knowledge that the battle was far from over. The road ahead was uncertain, and the risks were greater than ever. But one thing remained clear: no matter what happened next, they would face it together, and perhaps that was enough. In the end, the question remained, why are humans so fearlessly determined? The answer wasn't simple. It wasn't about strength or intellect or sheer willpower. It was about something deeper, a connection to each other, to the things that mattered most. It was about surviving against all odds, and that in itself was the greatest strength of all. The journey was far from over, and Vra and Eno, united by an unbreakable bond, would face whatever came next, knowing that the universe would never be the same again.